if it's in the right interests of Canada, and I think there are certainly many scenarios where it will be in the right interests of Canada, we will be a willing participant. Does it include Greenland? I mean, it's a technical issue. To be honest, I haven't focused on that aspect of it specifically because our concern has been the protection of Canada.
The most explosive question isn't about a budget, it's about borders, missiles, and Greenland. Because when President Donald Trump starts talking about extending a Golden Dome defense shield over Greenland, that's not just a technical debate, that's a warning flare in the Arctic sky. And Canada's message, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, is clear. Canada will cooperate with the United States when it benefits Canada. But Canada will not be pulled into an American defense vision that turns the Arctic into a political chessboard.
There are many areas where we cooperate closely with the Americans for our defense. One of the most fundamental is in NORAD, in Northern Defense.
Carney is framing this as survival in a new world, one where hypersonic missiles and space-based threats are no longer movie plots. But the real controversy is what's under the surface. Canada is quietly preparing for a future where the US cannot be fully trusted as the default supplier, the default shield, or the default decision-maker. And that is exactly why Trump being mentioned here matters, because Trump's America First defense strategy is pushing allies to pick sides. And Canada is signaling, we're picking Canada. We've relied too heavily, vulnerabilities, dependencies we can no longer sustain, never hostage to the decisions of others.
The evolution of NORAD and Northern Defense in a world of hypersonic missiles, in a world where you have literally seconds to react, a world where attacks from space is not science fiction, but a potential near-term reality, certainly one we need to develop defenses against.
That line, never hostage, is not a random phrase. That is a direct message to Washington, whether they admit it or not. It's basically saying, Canada is done being the country that pays, waits, and buys whatever the US decides is available. And when you combine that with Greenland and the Golden Dome question, you see the bigger picture. Canada is preparing to defend the Arctic, with or without US permission.
Our Canadian armed forces will be backed by a resilient Canadian defense industrial base. Every dollar will be spent to maximize jobs, careers, and industries right here in Canada.
Carney then drops the credibility play, NATO spending and recruitment numbers.
We're now on track to meet our 2% NATO target by this spring, a full decade ahead of the previous schedule.
Then it gets serious. The spending figures are massive, and the implications are political.
We have committed to double our defense expenditures by the end of this decade. And that amounts to an additional $80 billion over the next 5 years. In addition, as part of our NATO commitments, we will invest an additional $45 billion per year on domestic resilience, yielding both security and economic benefits.
This isn't just defense spending, it's an industrial reset. Canada is buying security and buying leverage at the same time. And Carney goes even further. $180 billion in defense procurement, $290 billion in defense and security infrastructure, 125,000 high-paying jobs. That's not a policy. That's a national machine being rebuilt. And it's happening at a time when Trump-style politics treats allies like customers, not partners. Now comes the part that could irritate Washington the most, the build, partner, buy framework.
First, we will build in Canada and prioritize Canadian companies. As a matter of policy, military procurement in areas where we have sovereign capabilities will be directed to Canadian firms first. Where we can't build alone, we will partner with like-minded allies, helping to attract investment, transfer intellectual property, and integrate supply chains so that public dollars flow back to Canada and Canadian jobs created right here.
Read that again. Canadian firms first. That's the kind of line that triggers trade fights, lobbying pressure, and quiet diplomatic anger, because for decades, Canada has fed billions into US defense giants. And Carney doesn't even hide the intention. Build at home. Partner with allies. Buy abroad only as a last resort. That is a complete reversal of the old habit, buy American. Because it's easier. This is Canada saying, easy is no longer safe. Then a reporter says out loud what everyone in defense already knows. 3/4 of Canada's defense capital spending goes to the United States. Carney calls it a partnership, then he calls it a dependency.
But it is a dependency, and it's a dependency we want to change in a positive way by building up our defense capacities here and our other partnerships abroad. I gave the example of the SAFE agreement with the European Union, which the minister signed formally last week. This is a $150 billion opportunity overall. What this strategy looks to do over the next 10 years is to move the domestic procurement to 70% of the overall procurement in defense. So it's a big shift from less than around a third to 70%.
That is not just a policy tweak. That is Canada telling the US defense industry, your guaranteed Canadian pipeline is being cut down. And here's where the controversy hits. Carney isn't just pulling away from the US. He's replacing the dependency with a new map. He points directly to Europe, and he names a gigantic figure. $150 billion opportunity with the European Union, where Canada is treated like a local supplier inside their supply chain. So in plain language, Canada is building a defense industrial bridge to Europe, while the US is pushing America first. Now we get the direct Trump pivot. The reporter references Trump's executive order, the America First arms transfer strategy.
Our expectations in terms of partnering with those defense suppliers have been considerably, if not dramatically, increased. We want partnership, we want development, we want to be part of the supply chains, and we are very confident in our ability to grow our defense capabilities.
Trump strengthens the US base, and Canada responds by building its own, not as competition, but as insurance. Carney says there are areas where US tech suits Canada, but the conditions are changing. Canada wants partnership, supply chain integration, and real benefits back home. Then the Greenland question returns like a thunderclap. Trump allegedly said Canada doesn't want the Golden Dome extended over Greenland. Carney says he doesn't recognize the comment, but then he lays out the real focus: NORAD, hypersonic threats, and Canada's protection.
If it's in the right interests of Canada, and I think there are certainly many scenarios where it will be in the right interests of Canada, we will be a willing participant. Does it include Greenland? I mean, it's a technical issue. To be honest, I haven't focused on that aspect of it specifically because our concern has been the protection of Canada.
That's the key phrase: in the right interest of Canada. Not the right interest of Trump, not the right interest of Washington, not the right interest of a US election year narrative. And when asked about Greenland, Carney basically shrugs it off as technical, because his priority is Canada. That's subtle, but it's also a quiet refusal to get dragged into a Greenland-centered American storyline. So here's the bottom line. Canada is not announcing just a defense plan. Canada is announcing a new relationship with the United States, one where dependency is treated like a threat. Trump's America First approach is forcing allies to rethink everything, and Carney is signaling that Canada's next decade will be about sovereignty, industrial power, and Arctic control, even if that makes Washington uncomfortable. Because the message is simple: Canada will still cooperate with the US, but Canada will not be hostage to the US. And in the era of Trump politics, that might be the most controversial sentence Canada has said in years.